Hey y'all, today I am going to talk about books that I would recommend if you like certain anime, and today I'm going to start with the one that is on my shirt. I also use the ColourPop Naruto palette on my eyes for funsies. I'm starting with Naruto, which was kind of my first anime. Like, I watched Saturday morning cartoons on Kids WB and 4Kids, and they had some on like Sailor Moon on VHS. Naruto was the first anime that I sort of went out of my way to watch, so I would watch it on like 3-part videos on YouTube and like Mega Video or whatever, or just try to find it wherever I could. So I have very fond memories. I watched it as a kid, so I don't remember the series that well, even though it holds a very special place in my heart. But I have been rewatching it recently. It's been really fun. I got through the Chunin exams. Speaking of the Chunin exams, if you want the book with some trials that are kind of similar to the Chunin exams, but not as intense, I would recommend Of Jade and Dragons. Of Jade and Dragons is about a girl who leaves home to find out more about her father's murder, and then she gets the chance to join the trials, to join the engineering guild that he used to be a part of. It really reminded me of the Chunin exams because there are different levels of tests. Like, the first one is a written exam, just like in Naruto, and then it gets a bit more intense with each level. There's like 3 levels, though it never really gets as intense as the Chunin exams, which was a little disappointing. But I still really liked it, and it honestly made me want to look for other books with like an intense competition to be more like the Chunin exams. But after doing that, I kind of realized that what I love about the Chunin exams isn't just like the intense competitive aspect. It's also the fact that, you know, you have friendships there, you have people supporting each other. It's not just like everyone against each other. And that's something I like about Of Jade and Dragons too, you know, there's some friendships. I really love one of Ying, the main character's friends. He starts off as this like snooty little kid, and he kind of stays that way, but he also like ends up being a really great friend to her, and it was really cool. I also like how the trials test different aspects like knowledge and creativity and character. So yeah, I thought it was really interesting. So if you don't mind that it's a bit lower stakes than the Chunin exams, I would totally recommend. Another thing I really appreciate about Naruto is that it's really an underdog story. He was an outcast, and he had to work really hard just to pass his graduation exam, and he's always rooting for other outcasts. And because of his background, I would recommend The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. The Poppy War is the first book in an epic military fantasy trilogy. It's about a girl named Rin who is really poor, but she works really hard to get into this elite military school. She even pours hot wax on herself to keep herself awake so she can keep studying. Then after going to the academy, she becomes a shaman, and she has to learn to control the powers lent to her by a god. It's also really cool to see another rivalry turn into an unexpected friendship. I also just think R.F. Kuang's writing is so amazing. You're gonna hear more on it later because I recommend other books by her too. But yeah, so much stuff happens in her books, and I definitely recommend reading any of them really. But if you're into Naruto, then check out the Poppy War. I will say that Poppy War is an adult trilogy, so just keep that in mind. It does get pretty dark, but if you're okay with that, then I totally recommend. The next anime that I'm going to recommend a book for is Carole & Tuesday. I love this anime. From the first episode, when Carole and Tuesday first sat down to play music together, I just knew it was going to be something special. If you want a story about musicians with some sci-fi, I would recommend Light from Uncommon Stars. This book is about a trans girl named Katrina who runs away from home with her violin, and it's also about a violin teacher named Shizuka who made a deal with the devil to trade the souls of 7 of her students for her own success, and she needs to trade 1 more soul, so she's looking for another student, and of course Katrina becomes her student. Shizuka also has a love interest who's an alien donut lady, and it's very cute. The writing is really beautiful, and it has so much appreciation for food and music. Another fun thing about Katrina is that she normally plays anime and video game covers, so if you're a fan of anime, that's a fun tidbit. It's honestly my favorite adult novel. So that's another thing to keep in mind with this book, is that it's an adult novel. If you ever need to look up trigger warnings for a book, I would recommend Storygraph. It has content warnings at the bottom of each page for a book. Users can suggest content warnings when they leave a review. Okay, the next anime slash category of anime that I'm going to recommend a book for is Ouran High School Host Club, mainly just because it's a reverse harem anime, meaning it's an anime where there's a bunch of potential love interests and it's aimed at girls. The other reverse harem animes I can think of are all like fantasy or historical, which don't really fit the two books I'm going to recommend, but in general, I think if you like reverse harem anime or otome games, you might enjoy these books. Both books I'm going to recommend are YA rom-coms, and the first one is The Jasmine Project. After Jasmine finds out that her boyfriend cheated on her, her family decides to try to set her up on dates with 3 different guys. Honestly, I wish I could talk about each guy, but I don't remember, and like that's kind of the problem with trying to recommend books that I read before I started booktube, because I didn't really like leave reviews or take notes on the books I was reading like I do now. I do remember really enjoying it, and I remember that as I was reading, I felt like I was playing an otome game, and it was really fun. It is really cute. Jasmine has a nice meet cute moment with each of the guys. I also think it's just a very endearing book. Jasmine has this huge extended family. They're not all blood related to her, but they're family nonetheless, and I think it's really sweet. I also really love how Jasmine is into cooking, and she puts parts of her heritage into her food. It was just in general a really sweet and heartwarming book. The next book I would recommend, I did not like as much as The Jasmine Project, but I like the romance in this one more. That book is Chloe and the Kha Boys. Chloe is a Chinese Filipino girl who lives in Manila, and she's planning to go to the States for college to be an animator, but her dad doesn't want her to go, so he starts setting her up on dates with guys. I would totally recommend this for people who like Cinderella's, people who are like kind of grumpy on the outside but then end up being kind of sweet. I also really appreciate this book for having a brown-skinned male love interest on the cover, because I feel like that's really rare. I do wish it was more common for books with Southeast Asian leads, because you know, a lot of Southeast Asians have brown skin. But yeah, that's just something that I love to see. The next anime I'm going to recommend a couple books for is Fullmetal Alchemist. Specifically Brotherhood. I think these could probably apply for both shows, but I watched Brotherhood. For those who don't know, this show is about 2 brothers named Ed and Al, and they use alchemy to try to bring back their dead mother, but they do not succeed, and it ends up costing them Al's whole body and Ed's arm and leg. The quintessential rule of alchemy that's repeated throughout the series is the law of equivalent exchange, so you can't gain something without giving up something of equal value. The book I'm about to recommend has something similar. It's also about alchemy, and it has a rule that you cannot create good without also creating evil, and that book is The Scarlet Alchemist. The Scarlet Alchemist is about a girl named Zilan, and she's grown up in poverty, but she does make a little money by using alchemy to bring people back from the dead. And in this story, she actually does succeed in doing that, but because of that rule I mentioned earlier, you kind of get the feeling that there is some cost to it, but it's not immediately obvious. Anyway, then Zilan gets the chance to take the test to become a royal alchemist, so she goes to the capital, and she gets wrapped up in a lot of really wild stuff happening in the palace. There's a lot of really great twists in this book, like especially towards the end. I was just like really shook by everything that was happening. I will say I almost DNF'd this book in the beginning because of how grossly the other alchemists were treating her, but I think the worst of it was during her first test, and after that it was like, okay. They still don't like her, but that scene was the worst. I'm really glad I stuck through it because this book is so good, and I'm so excited for the sequel to come out. Another book I would recommend for FMA fans, if you want something with a more similar setting, I would recommend Babel Again by R.F. Kuang. Babel is set in 1830s England, and FMA is set in a fictional country inspired by Europe during the Industrial Revolution. so setting's pretty similar. Babel is about an orphan from China named Robin who gets brought up in London, and eventually he enrolls in Oxford's Institute of Translation, also known as Babel. Babel has a really interesting magic system called silverworking, and basically how it works is translators can enchant a bar of silver by engraving a word in 2 different languages on each side, and then the bar can do something related to what is lost in translation. There's a rule that you have to know each of the languages well enough to have dreams in that language. So because of that, a lot of the students at Babel are people like Robin who spent their childhood in another country, so they know a different language very well. Robin and his friends enjoy the privileges of being a student of Babel because it's a very elite part of the university, but many of them also face the reality of being a racial minority, and they have to grapple with how silverworking gives Britain power over the countries that they came from. It's a really gripping and intelligent book, and I just love it so much. While I'm continuing recommending R.F. Kuang books, I'm also going to do one more. If you're a fan of Death Note, you may like the book Yellowface. I know these 2 stories are about totally different topics. Death Note is about a guy who can kill someone by writing their name in a notebook, and Yellowface is about a white woman who stole her Asian friend's manuscript after witnessing her death. But both stories are a thriller from the point of view of a criminal trying to get away with their crime, and we get to see how far they're willing to go to do that. Both protagonists really believe that what they're doing is right. In Death Note, Light kills criminals and he thinks he's like this champion of justice, and in Yellowface, June really thinks that she's telling a story that she made her own, and the more that people criticize her, the more determined she is to prove that she had the right to tell this story. I think R.F. Kuang did a really great job of writing her as a complex character. Even though she does terrible things, I see why she does the things she does, and it's just such a compelling book. The next anime I'm going to recommend a book for is Snow White with the Red Hair. It's a very relaxing romance anime about a girl who becomes a court herbalist. If you like the vibes and share Shirayuki's love of nature, I would recommend World of Wonders. It's a non-fiction collection of essays about various things in nature and the author's personal connection to them. I picked up this book because the author did like a virtual event with my school, and she just was so lovely, and she's also Filipino. She's Filipino and Indian, but I'm Filipino, so I mostly read it partly because of her being Filipino. She really does seem to view the world with wonder, and you can really feel that in her writing, and it's just a really lovely book. The next anime that I'm recommending a book for is Agretzko. If you want a comedy about a working woman who has to deal with some workplace bullshit, I would recommend Loathe at First Sight. So I know that the title makes this seem like an enemies to lovers rom-com, but it's not. It's really not. First of all, the enemies part is like not there. Like, she finds him annoying in the beginning because of one incident, but that's it. Also, the romance is very much a subplot. The story is really mostly about the main character working through her career. So if you go on Goodreads and see that it has kind of a low rating, I think it's honestly largely because of the misleading title, which is unfortunate. I do recognize that, you know, people have a right to be disappointed, but I enjoyed it for what it is, even though I was expecting a romance. And I think that you have an even greater chance of enjoying it if you go in with the right expectations. So yeah, this book is about a Korean American woman named Melody, and she works in the very male-dominated game industry. I really appreciated the Asian American representation, and I like how even though it is a male-dominated industry, Melody does have other women in the book who support her, so it's not just non-stop sexism. I also did find the romance cute as a subplot. There's also a cute minor friendship between the love interest and one of the side characters, and I just thought it was a really fun book. The next anime I'm going to recommend a book for is Penguin Drum. It's a very unique show. It's an eco-horror anime, so it's pretty wild. But if you want another story about characters who are trying to change fate and would do anything to save their family, I would recommend Only a Monster. Only a Monster is the first book in a YA fantasy trilogy about a girl named Joan who finds out that her family can travel through time by stealing years of people's lifespans. She also learns that her crush is a legendary monster slayer who is trying to get rid of people with her ability. In order to save her family, Joan has to use the power she's just discovered and come to terms with being a so-called monster. Yeah, the monsters in this book are just what they call people with the power to travel through time. Another thing that's kind of similar to Penguin Drum is Joan ends up traveling through time with this guy who doesn't want to travel with her, but they kind of end up reluctantly working together, which is kind of similar to how Shoma and Ringo end up spending time together in Penguin Drum. I love Shoma and Ringo. There are 2 books of this trilogy out so far. I did really enjoy the first book, but I especially appreciated the trilogy when I got to the second book and I got to see how the ending of the first book changed everything. It was just so good. So I'm definitely looking forward to see how it ends, and I would recommend getting into it. The last anime that I'm going to recommend a book for is Steins Gate. Steins Gate is a show about scientists who are very intellectually curious and interested in research and experimentation. It's also a story about time travel and an exploration of human nature and what people would change about their lives if they had the power to do so. And if you like those aspects of Steins Gate, I would recommend The Atlas 6. The Atlas 6 is the first book in an adult trilogy about 6 people who are chosen to use their powers to conduct research in these secret archives that hold a lot of information that's been lost to society. So it's not quite like Okabe's Future Gadget Laboratory in Steins Gate, which is just based in an apartment, but I think both stories explore similar themes, even if they kind of go in different directions. One of the main topics of experimentation in the Atlas 6 is time travel. I wouldn't say it's as central to the story as it is in Steins Gate, but it is still very much there. I think the main characters are really interesting and all have very distinct personalities, and I think Olivia Blake is really good at writing multiple points of view. I did read the whole trilogy, and honestly, like, the third book, like, really left such an impression on me. I just, like, kept thinking about it after reading it. I also do think that similar to Only a Monster, I grew to appreciate the trilogy a lot more when I got to the second book and saw how things changed after the ending to the first one. So yeah, I love these books, and I think they're just such a great exploration of how knowledge is carnage, which is on the cover of the first book. Hey y'all, just wanted to pop in with another recommendation for fans of Steins Gate because I recently read this comic called Mahara, and this is a Filipino comic available in English, and basically the concept is over a century after winning its revolution against Spain, the Philippines sits at the heart of a global superpower that is tearing apart at the seams. I feel like I can't really talk that much about the story because this first volume really is just the setup of a longer story, but I'm really excited to see more after reading this because it was really good. The reason why I would recommend it for fans of Steins Gate is because in the beginning, right after the prologue, you sort of get introduced to some weird things happening in the world. For example, a body appears at the edge of the boardwalk, 12 days decompose, and rumor has it that his only ID was issued by a country that doesn't exist. And then another weird thing that happens is a neighbor's dog vanishes during a walk. A few days later, the dog comes back with an identical double. And so it kind of reminds me of the beginning of Steins Gate because in the beginning, Okabe finds Kurisu murdered and then he sees her alive and it's like, what are all these weird things happening in the world? And it kind of just gets you interested to keep going to find out more. And yeah, I just really want to recommend this comic. Also partly because I just want Filipino comics to do well in the States. It might be a bit harder to find than your average comic because it's not a Western comic and it's also not manga, so your local bookstores probably won't carry it, but I know it's on Amazon and you can also order it from Hot Tropics, which is a store that distributes a lot of Filipino comics in the States. So yeah, those are all the recommendations I have today. If you have any book recommendations based on any of these anime, let me know. Or if you just want to talk to me about any of these anime or books in general, I do love all these anime very dearly, and I like all these books as well. I've been trying to find a book that's really similar to Angel Beats, because that's also one of my favorites. So let me know if you have a recommendation for that. I'm also trying to find more books that are similar to the Chunin exams, because the Chunin exams are just so good. Oh yeah, fun fact, I am filming this on Naruto's birthday, which is October 10th, although who knows when I'm gonna have the time to actually edit this and upload it, because I'm about to go on vacation in San Francisco for the Filipino Book Festival. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I hope you found something rad.